We're told that Africa is the most vulnerable continent when it comes to climate change because we're going to see desertification, flooding, temperatures rising. What's your assessment of the situation?
You're absolutely right. Actually, our continent, unfortunately, while having contributed very little to climate change, actually the carbon footprint of Africa is 4% of the global greenhouse gas emissions, yet our region is one of the most vulnerable in terms of changes in temperature, rainfall patterns, coastal defenses, etc., which make us quite vulnerable and which requires, according to the estimates, up to $40 billion a year of additional investments to make our agriculture more resilient, to make our roads and railways and our electricity more adapted to the realities of the new climate.
In terms of an approach to the solution, which is the best way? Should we be going the mitigation route, going out with all-out prevention strategies, or adapting the resources we already have to the situation as it unfolds?
Well, I think we need a bit of both. The opportunity that Africa has is that in terms of mitigation, it can help globally in a substantial way if it is offered additional financial resources to help it choose to go with the renewable energy resources and to help it fight the deforestation. We have in the Central Africa region the second lung of the earth, which is threatened with heavy wood cutting because of lack of alternatives. So if we are able to channel more resources to Africa, we could reverse this trend. On the adaptation side, of course, we also have huge needs in terms of added financing to make our roads more robust, our buildings more resilient to disasters, our agriculture more used to irrigation and less dependent on rainfall, and then etc. All these sorts of investments are needed in Africa.
Now, Hela, you talk about at least $40 billion needed per annum to tackle the range of problems. Any investor who wants to be part of an investment solution is not looking to be charitable, also wants to see viable, commercially viable initiatives. What are they? Because a lot of the debates are looking at the merits of wind versus solar versus renewables. Where should the investments be going?
You're absolutely right. The beauty is that in Africa, we can actually offer commercial opportunities for those investors who want to make money and, by the way, do good. You're absolutely right that Africa is endowed with a lot of renewable resources, ranging from hydropower, like the ability to generate energy from its large water resources, only 8% of that is developed, or geothermal, it's like the energy coming from the heat in volcanic countries, that's for the Eastern Africa region, a significant resource, to going to the wind and the more expensive one, which is the solar. However, to harness this, we need to have smart ways of blending financial resources. So we have the stream of investors who are looking at the commercial aspect, and we also have the developed countries looking for countries in the world that can help them fight the global warming. So they can channel concessional financial resources that can be mixed with the commercial money and make projects happen in a more robust way and while making everybody satisfied.
Very briefly, let's get into the nitty-gritties of funding models, particularly where development finance institutions such as yours get involved. We talk public-private partnerships, that's one area. Credit lines and guarantees, that's another area for businesses. Joint ventures. What are the various options that would make a lot of these projects viable and, you know, speedy in terms of getting them galvanized off the ground?
Indeed, the African Development Bank is one of the leading institutions in terms of financing public-private partnerships in Africa, especially in the infrastructure sectors. And what we observe is there could be merits there in terms of, again, when we are trying to handle the climate change issues, a lot of the projects can be done with private money if the public sector side can give the right incentives, meaning in the energy sector, pay the right tariff, in the transport sector, pay enough of the extra cost to make the concession viable to the private sector. So that is where we think you will need a lot of this financial engineering, where you use different instruments and you bring in there the developed countries to channel through institutions like the development finance institutions such as the African Development Bank, concessional resources or grant type resources that will make the public support available, because in many of our countries these are low income countries, and the public sector side, the governments, while very willing and interested to do these public-private partnerships in green energy or in sustainable transport, in sustainable ways of irrigation and agriculture, they will need to have additional financial resources. And there the bank, in terms of the private sector side, indeed is active on debt, equity, guarantees, lines of credit. These are usual instruments we use. What we lack in Africa is that this region has benefited least in the world in terms of these grant-like, concessional type of climate finance, which is quite paradoxical, because our region is also overall low income and vulnerable to climate change. So we have to find the financial mechanisms which can channel a more substantial part of the concessional climate financing to our private sponsors and governments.